What's going on, everyone? Oregon fans, how we doing? How we doing? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres, publisher and lead editor of Ducks Digest, covering the Oregon Ducks for Fan Nation over on Sports Illustrated, in the Sports Illustrated family, rather, in that network. But we are here live on YouTube, youtube.com/Oregon football. Max Torres is where you can find us. If you guys are here in the live show, drop a comment in the live chat and let me know. Or if you're watching on replay, go ahead and leave a comment and let me know how you're feeling about the latest commitment in the 2023 recruiting class for the Ducks, Lipe Moala. We are going to be talking about him on this show and what's next for Oregon on the recruiting trail here in the class of 2023. So we're going to be breaking down this commitment and then talking about what's next for the Ducks. Quick reminder for you guys, if you're new here or if you're returning, make sure you hit the like button on the video, subscribe to the channel, leave me a comment, and questions are always welcome. You can DM me or the Ducks Dish podcast on Twitter. So with all that being said, let's hop into this latest episode. 2023 modern day offensive lineman Lipe Moala has committed to Oregon. He announced his commitment on Friday night during his senior night festivities at Modern Day. So this is definitely a big decision for him and a big decision for Oregon, a big pickup for Oregon because offensive line has been a major focus in this class. And honestly, it's been a little bit of a concern, I think, in the eye of some Oregon fans because of how long it has taken to start getting some momentum at the offensive line position, which is kind of odd, especially considering how well Oregon's offensive line is playing and how well they've been recruiting the position, even under the new coaching staff, with Josh Connerly obviously being the big crown jewel of the 2022 class, late five-star offensive lineman committing to Oregon over USC out of the state of Washington, Seattle Rainier Beach, and he has played in every game so far this year for Oregon. So definitely a good sign there for the Ducks and for him just to come in and make an impact early on in his time at the college level. So the offensive line has definitely been playing real solid. Lipe Moala is the second commitment for Oregon on the offensive line in 2023, joining Bryce Bolton, who is from Palm Desert High School, also in Southern California. Let's see, where do we want to go here? We could just talk a little bit more about Moala, and then I can throw on some film for him. I think with this commitment, it was a recruitment that really came together pretty fast for Oregon. I believe the Ducks offered earlier on this month in October. He took an unofficial visit to Eugene. I think it was for the Stanford game that I want to say, but got the offer, took the visit, and obviously on Friday, this one was wrapped up and he was committed. So this was a recruitment that wasn't super heavily contested, which is a little bit surprising, especially for a modern day player, one of the best team in the nation right now. I think they're the national number one after beating St. John Bosco. I was at that game. That game was nuts. I've gotten to see Moala play, a number of times this year. I think 3 times actually. I got to see him against Corona Centennial, against Mililani, the Hawaii team. And then I also got to see him against St. John Bosco. So I've been able to see him a couple times. And for Moala, I think this is a good fit for him at Oregon. You know, I read a little bit of some of the other reports, just talking about some of the quotes that he had for why he committed to Oregon, and the culture fit was something for him that he really felt at home with. And you got to think that Oregon wants to keep that modern day pipeline going, right? Maybe we could talk about that for a second, because you find schools across the country that, certain teams are really high on, or that they're always going to have people coming in throughout the country to recruit their players. And Modern Day is absolutely one of those schools. What's interesting with Modern Day, especially on their offensive line, is that it's actually a pretty young team. Really, most of their players, I feel like they don't have a lot of like super heavily recruited seniors this year. You have Jordan Davison, the running back. He's a 5-star, 2025. Also has an offer from Oregon. You have Nathan Frazier, a running back who's a 2024. I had a recent update on him over on ducksdigest.com. He's going to be in Eugene for Oregon's game against UCLA this weekend. You have Marcus Harris, a 2025 wide receiver. And then you also have Jordan Baker on the offensive line. So he's an Oregon legacy. He's loving the Ducks so far in his recruitment. His brother, obviously, being Gary Baker, the former Oregon defensive lineman, excuse me. So I think that this obviously is something that Oregon can use to kind of carry some momentum into that recruitment with Brandon Baker, one of the best offensive linemen in the country for 2024. And you also have DeAndre Carter, who I believe plays left tackle for the Monarchs, and he is also a super special talent. So for Oregon to be able to get into the game this late with Moala and still get a commitment is absolutely a really strong statement for that coaching staff and their ability to recruit. Even though Moala is a little bit more of an underrated guy, not a whole bunch of offers. Other schools that were in it on this one were Louisville, Washington, Utah. None of those teams necessarily blowing you away with their play in their last couple of years, although Utah did win their first Pac-12 title last year, get that 1-point win over USC at home in Salt Lake City. That was certainly one of the best games of the weekend. But let's go ahead and throw on some highlights for Lipe Moala so we can get a little bit of a better sense at what kind of a player Oregon's getting. 6'7", 315 pounds coming out of Mater Dei. We got his midseason senior highlights up on the screen right now. You see him there at right guard next to Brandon Baker. That's another thing that's so interesting about Lipe is how big he is, and he's playing on the interior. So you usually want those guys to be pretty mobile. And I think that's one of the things that stands out on tape for Moala is just the mobility that he has at his size. Really does a good job of, getting hands on his guy and initiating that contact. Definitely a physical prospect that plays with that nastiness and grit. There he is against Corona Centennial with that big run from Jordan Davison. So I think he's maybe a little bit bigger than you would expect for an interior guy, especially when you compare him to Bryce Bolton, the other Oregon offensive line commit here in 2023. He's an interior offensive lineman as well. 6'3", 250 pounds, just wide open lanes here. This looks like this might be from a scrimmage earlier in the year. But he's a huge dude, obviously has that college-ready body, but I think there's still some room to add to his frame. You see him with when he's pulling and he's getting out there in pass protection as well. I think one thing that I would like to see a little bit more of from Moala in his game is just a little bit more finishing power. I mean, that's a pretty small guy that he just demolished right there. But I think for someone of his size, I'm kind of surprised that there's not as much power there. It is worth mentioning, however, that Lipe Moala did miss a majority of his junior season due to injury. So he's still kind of getting his feet back underneath him. And obviously there's some room to grow and some, lost time, if you will, to make up for from last year. But coming from a school like Mater Dei, he's getting really good coaching. There's still some room to grow for him, both physically and from his technique. I think once he gets to the college level, you get some of that college coaching from Adrian Clem and that offensive line staff. They are only going to continue to improve in terms of what he has on what he's able to put on tape, what he's able to show you in practice. And I don't think that he necessarily projects as an early play time, starter necessarily, or even like he'll be in the rotation too much as a true freshman. But I don't think that the way that Oregon's built its class and just the depth that they have on the roster, I know they're going after some other offensive linemen in the 2023 recruiting class. We'll definitely talk about some of those guys, but I think that this is a great commitment for Oregon, great timing for the Ducks. This recent commitment for them actually put them just past USC in the 2023 recruiting rankings. So I'm going to bring those up on my screen here just to kind of show you guys where Oregon is at. So Oregon now has 20 commitments in their 2023 recruiting class. That is good for the number 13 overall class on the 247 rankings. That's usually the system that I like to use, the outlet that I like to use for recruiting rankings. So 20 commits overall for Dan Lanning and company in his first full recruiting cycle. And I think it's making a good statement for sure. As you can see here, they have the top class in the Pac-12 over USC just by 0.08 points. So a very, very slim margin here. 19 commits for USC, and Oregon has 2 5-stars, as does USC, and 10 4-stars. And here's an interesting number that I think is always cool to look at. Average commit rating of 91.08. So that's well within 4-star territory for the Ducks. They're averaging about a 4-star commitment per every recruit that they earn a pledge from. And it's just going to continue to be a really, really interesting recruiting battle between these two programs, both with first-year head coaches that are moving over to new cities, new schools. I actually got to meet Lincoln Riley last week at the Modern Day Bosco game, so that was pretty special moment for me, just because I read this one book that was written about him called Sooner during his time at Oklahoma and kind of his rise to a star head coach. So I was like, dang, I read a book about you, and I got to meet him last week, so that was definitely pretty special for me. But yeah, this Oregon class, they're in a good spot. You still have some decent room. I think that we'll get into some more of that and what's next for Oregon. So we'll go ahead and get that off the screen. I think one other interesting update that we just have to talk about. I didn't do a podcast this weekend, so apologies for that. But how about game day coming to Oregon? College game day will be going to Eugene for number 9 UCLA against number 10 Oregon. That game is set for 12:30 kickoff, 12:30 Pacific, and it will be on Fox. So that's a new update for today, that the Ducks will be playing UCLA on Fox if you're not able to make that trip out to Eugene for that game. And that's going to be a fun one. There's a lot on the line for both teams in this one. Both Oregon and UCLA are the last 2 teams in conference play that have not lost in Pac-12 play just yet. And UCLA was definitely an interesting one because they were undefeated for a while, but they hadn't really played that many teams. And then they beat UCLA. And I thought that definitely cemented them as a legit Pac-12 contender. And who knows what their ceiling is. But we're going to be talking plenty more about Oregon and UCLA. We're going to be talking about them all this week over on ducksdigest.com and here on YouTube on my show, Ducks Dish. So trying to take a more recruiting heavy approach of late with my content on all platforms because that's what I really enjoy. And, for example, I'm trying to make it out to Long Beach Poly this week to interview 2024 USC linebacker commit Dylan Williams because he got an offer from Oregon. So there's going to be a lot of fun stuff to talk about. We got some folks here in the live chat checking in. Drew says, "Sco Ducks." What's going on, Drew? Thanks for joining the show. Let's see. Andrew says, "Love adding modern day talent, especially at O-line. Still hoping Fano and Salah's bro come to Eugene too." I think you might be talking about Fiope's brother, but I got you. We're going to talk about both of those guys later on in the show. Andrew also says, and they're long shots, but the chance of getting Mateo Yu and Mpemba would make that D-line an absolute monster unit. Yeah, Samuel Mpemba out of IMG and Mateo Uyangalele out of Bosco. Definitely 2 of the biggest names that Oregon is still pursuing here in 2023. I would say that Mateo is probably the more likely of these 2, especially because he's in their backyard in St. John Bosco, Bellflower, and a much closer geography is kind of what I'm getting at there. But I feel like I keep getting vibes about Ohio State on that recruitment. But he was wearing Oregon gloves when I saw him at that modern day St. John Bosco game. So you never know. It's not over until it's over. Got to get him back on campus, I think, to really have a good shot in that one. And then last one from Andrew. He says game day and Pate State's going to be there. Yep. Josh Pate of the Late Kick podcast is going to be there. So that's going to be awesome. Finally getting some love for the West Coast. And then Simeon to Big Screen is checking in as well. So it's going to be an exciting week. And you guys got to make sure you're tapped in with me. Follow me on Twitter at mtorresports to keep up to date with all the latest news, updates, recruiting interviews. That's the fastest way to get all of it from me over there on Twitter. So we're going to go ahead and take a quick break for those of us on the podcasting platforms, and we'll be right back with more Oregon football recruiting talk after this. All right, welcome back to the Ducks Dish podcast. Hope everybody's having a great start to the week, Monday morning, about 10:30 out here on the West Coast. And I'm your host, Max Torres. We're talking some Oregon football recruiting, and now we are faced with the question that always comes up after Oregon gets a commitment on the recruiting trail. What's next for Oregon? What's next on the recruiting trail for Oregon? So Ducks have the top class in the Pac-12, which is always a great bragging right to have, but it could literally be gone at any moment, seeing that USC is hot on the recruiting trail as well. But we need to talk about kind of where some of these Oregon coaches were on the road recruiting, and then kind of some of the next targets that we're going to be looking at on the offensive line and some other skill guys as well. So just from last week, in case you guys didn't see the story I wrote about tracking the coaches over on Ducks Digest, where they're going to be and who they're going to be seeing. Coach Carlos Laughlin was in Mississippi to check on 4-star running back commit Dante Dowdell. Dante didn't play in that game, unfortunately, because he is nursing an ankle injury, but it doesn't look like it's going to be too serious, and he should be back in action relatively soon from what I'm told. So definitely important for Oregon to continue recruiting Dante. I think he's coming out for his for another visit, either the Washington weekend or the Utah weekend, possibly even both. But that's kind of just some of what I'm hearing right now from the people that I'm talking to that are close to that recruitment. So that's big. Dante is obviously one of the headliners in this class, even though his recruiting ranking may not reflect that, but he is an absolute stud. Love watching that guy play. Here's an interesting note. I talked about it a little bit, I think, last week, but Oregon is still going after Cameron Cook, the TCU running back commit here in 2023. He's a 4-star prospect out of Stony Point High School in Round Rock, Texas. Nearly 20 reported offers before making that initial commitment to the TCU Horned Frogs, who have been playing some awesome football this year. And it's an interesting recruitment to track for Cook, because Oregon was in on a number of guys in the 2023 class before Dowdell initially hopped into the fold. Jeremiah Love just committed to Notre Dame over the weekend. So that's a big pickup for Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman, who just lost to Stanford. That's Stanford's first win against a Power 5 team, against an FBS opponent, more specifically, since they beat Oregon last year. So that's just that loss. Notre Dame's loss to Stanford and Cal's loss to Colorado were two of the worst losses of last week, I think. So that's pretty crazy. But yeah, Oregon, I just wanted to mention Cam Cook here because it's interesting to track who else they're still going after, especially with a lot of these top prospects in the country looking to sign early, enroll early, just hop into college football. So keep an eye on Cameron Cook and kind of what's going on there. We'll see if Oregon can get him out to Eugene for a visit. And then other coaches that were on the road recruiting, you had Tosh Lapoy in Texas to check in on Johnny Bowens, the former Texas A&M defensive line commit. Johnny Bowens has absolutely emerged as a top prospect, top target for the Ducks in this 2023 cycle after multiple visits here in the last 6 months, really getting out to Eugene in the spring, reopening his recruitment. Obviously, that visit gave him a lot to think about when he was committed to Texas A&M at the time. And then he was back in town for the Stanford game as well. And I don't believe he's taken an official visit to Oregon just yet. So definitely important to get time in front of him, go out to Texas to show him that he's a priority, and then work on getting him back into Eugene for another trip. Not totally sure if he's going to be enrolling early, or deciding early. I don't know the timeline there. Have yet to talk to him this time around. Brooks says, I hope we get Johnny Bowen. That would make 2 commitments from the San Antonio area this cycle. Yeah, Texas is absolutely a hot spot for talent. We all know that. And then Oregon also has Tyler Turner, the safety out of San Antonio. I'm forgetting the name of the school off the top of my head, but he's from San Antonio. And then you also have Ashton Cozart out of Flower Mound, Texas, Marcus High School. And then you also have Terrence Green out of Cypress, I believe it is. So Oregon is all over the state of Texas, and you have to be if you want to contend for a top class, and certainly in the Pac-12 and even nationally, you have to tap into the country's most powerful states. And what is that? California, Texas, and Florida. Texas is going to easily be the hardest one for them to tap into because of distance. And I don't believe there's as many Florida connections on this staff as maybe the previous one was with Mario and Alex Mirabal, a couple other guys as well. But Johnny Bowen's definitely a big target for Oregon in this class, and he could be someone that they want to add to their front seven. And then Kenny Dillingham and Dan Lanning were out in Detroit to see five-star quarterback Dante Moore in action. He is the headliner of this class, probably the most important recruit in this class, just because Oregon has not had the best luck when it comes to high school prep quarterbacks of late. They had Bo Nix out of the transfer portal, so I feel like you can't really count that. Tyler Shuck was a starter at Oregon, but he was kind of wishy-washy. Anthony Brown was a transfer. And then Ty Thompson, as far as just kind of his projection, he's the guy that they have as their backup who is able to come in and get more reps that he definitely needs. But I just don't know how confident you are as an Oregon fan. If Bo leaves after this season, I'm not too sure that Ty Thompson's the number one, without a doubt, starter. I think there would definitely be a competition with him and Dante, and then Jay Butterfield as well. Depending on what the quarterback room looks like. So it's going to be very important to keep Dante Moore locked in and continue to recruit him. The only other guy that I wanted to talk about as far as tracking coaches, Demetrius Martin was out in Los Angeles to see Roderick Pleasant. Him and Dalen Austin are probably the two top DBs on Oregon's board here in 2023. Dalen Austin being an LSU cornerback commit at Long Beach Poly. Roderick Pleasant being I think he's the top uncommitted corner other than Cormani McLean in the 23 class. He's over at Gardena Serra, and man, that guy is fast. He's fun to watch. For whatever reason, when I saw Serra and Long Beach Poly play, I think that was my first high school game out here in Los Angeles, or in Long Beach. Yeah. Roderick Pleasant barely I don't even think he had a single touch on offense. And then now I'm seeing highlights later in the season, and they're getting him much more involved on offense. And I was like, why didn't you do that against Long Beach Poly? Their offense was just super stagnant and one-dimensional in that game, a game that Poly ended up winning. So that's where some of these Oregon coaches were. And now we're going to talk about some more names in the 2023 class that the Ducks are recruiting. Spencer Fano is one of the biggest names at offensive line that has been on Oregon's radar for quite some time. He was in town for the Stanford game as well, for his official visit. So definitely good for Oregon to get an official out of Spencer Fano. This was right on the heels of him announcing his top four of Utah, BYU, Oregon, and Michigan. I would probably wager that Oregon's in the driver's seat right now, that they have the lead. I don't know how far I would go with percentages or anything, but they've just put a ton of work in on that recruitment. He loves Eugene. He loves Oregon. His family loves Oregon and that coaching staff. Tons of connections and relationships there. Oregon's had a super strong pipeline in Utah dating back these past 3 or so years. More recently, you have Harrison Taggart out of Corner Canyon, Jackson Powers Johnson out of Corner Canyon. You also have the Sewell brothers, obviously. You have Jeffrey Bassa. So this is just a talent-rich state that is blowing up, and Oregon's been right there at the forefront of schools that are taking advantage of all the talented recruits in that state. So there are so many talented guys there that Oregon's going to continue to recruit. What's interesting with Spencer Fano, though, is that Clemson recently hopped into the boat, hopped on board, threw their hat in the ring with a scholarship offer. And I think we know how much that Clemson offer means. I think that's one is a little bit more highly coveted by a lot of recruits in terms of just really big name schools that are pursuing them. So Spencer Fano is someone to watch absolutely in this cycle. And then you also have Faope's brother, Iapani Laulaulu, from Farrington High School in Honolulu, I believe it is. Farrington High School in Honolulu. He was recently on campus as well. I think the same weekend that Fano was for his official visit. It looks like it's going to be an Oregon-Arizona battle for this one, but we know how well Oregon does with the brother game, as far as having a brother that's already on the team and then recruiting that brother to Oregon to join the Ducks. Adrian Clem has done a really good job recruiting Definitely missed on a couple guys. Miles McVay is one that comes to mind. I know he was super high on Oregon, but Alabama can also be tough to beat down the stretch, obviously. So I think that was a bummer for Oregon, but they're doing really well, I think, with some of these other guys, with Fano and then with Iapani here as well. I think that he's going to be someone that we could see hopping on board in the near future for Oregon. I don't believe that he has set a commitment date of yet with his recruitment, but he's definitely one of the guys that's top of Oregon's board. Number one prospect in the state of Hawaii, 6'2", 355 on the interior. While Fano is more of a tackle type of guy. I think he's playing tackle right now for Timpview, left tackle kind of guy. But yeah, this would be a solid get for Oregon without a doubt. It would fill a position of need. And I think that he's definitely someone that they feel really confident on. So put Iapani Lalaulu and Spencer Fano as some of the top guys that we could see Oregon potentially add here in the coming weeks, coming months. Neither of those guys have commitment dates set as of right now. But let's see, who else do they have in the 2023 class? Another name to know is Bryson Hurst, who is at Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College, one of the top JUCO programs in the entire country. And what else was I going to say? So he initially committed to Ole Miss, I want to say, coming out of high school before going to the JUCO level. But now he's out in Mississippi, which is a state that obviously Oregon is definitely tapping into with Dante Dowdell. They've offered 3 other teammates of his. Now 4 Picayune players have offers. I talked about Marion Tyson in a recent offer spotlight out there on Ducks Digest. So Bryson Hurst is another guy you want to watch. He did commit to Mississippi coming out of high school, but now he is at Mississippi Gulf Coast. Let's see. You also have Samson Okunlola, one of the top offensive linemen. I believe he's the top offensive tackle in the entire country for 2023. This is a really heavily contested recruitment. So far, he's the number 16 player in the country on 247, number 1 prospect in Massachusetts, and number 3 offensive tackle in this class of 2023. As you can see here, there's some crystal balls that are in for Miami, and I would definitely have to agree that it looks like it's probably Miami's prospect to lose, really, especially with how far away he is, and need to get him back on campus, I think, before that announcement eventually comes. So I think that these visits are just so important. That you gotta get these guys back on campus if you want to have a good chance, especially with these highly coveted guys that are way farther away from you. They're not in Southern California like a Roger Pleasant, or they're not in Washington like a Josh Connerly was. So definitely some tougher guys to maybe land. Other names in 2023 that the Ducks are going after, you have DeAndre Moore, the 2023 Louisville wide receiver commit, also at St. John Bosco. And then you also have Jonte Cook. Jonte Cook, the second 5-star Texas wide receiver commit out of DeSoto. We got to meet him last fall. Great dude, great kid, and he's probably the best playmaker on that DeSoto team, which put up 80 points last week, which is absolutely insane. That was a pretty short visit for Jonte Cook when he came out for that Stanford game for Oregon. It was definitely a visit they were kind of scrambling to put together, but they were able to get that one completed. Just a short 1-day visit, but it looks like there's some chatter that that Jonte Cook could want to return to Oregon for a visit after the season ends. Remember, that was the top 3 of Oregon, Texas, and Michigan during his time as a recruit before eventually committing to Steve Sarkisian and the Texas Longhorns. Let's see. I did not watch a whole lot of football this weekend. So I'm just double checking the schedule right now. Texas squeaking out a narrow 24-21 win over Iowa State last week. And then this weekend, they got to face Oklahoma State. So that's going to be a huge game. The Big 12 has been playing some pretty good football. Texas has Oklahoma State and then Kansas State the week after that. So it's going to be some tough matchups for Texas. I'd just be interested to see what kind of recruiting fallout there might be if Texas were to lose. Again, this upcoming, through this week, just dominated Oklahoma 49-0 in the Red River Shootout, and lost in overtime to Texas Tech last month. So Oregon is still heavily involved with Jonte Cook. I don't think anything's happening here in the near future. He figures to be another early enrollee guy. I would say just of his caliber, I wouldn't be surprised if he enrolled early. So those are some more names to kind of track as we try to figure out what's next for Oregon on the recruiting trail. I want to do some more digging to see what's going on at linebacker. So Oregon's starting to address more of these needs along the offensive line. Still trying to see if they can add some more playmakers at wide receiver and running back, with really just 2 wide receivers committed and 2 absolute studs in Jurion Dickey and Ashton Kozar. I might be seeing Jurion Dickey later this month, trying to see if I'm going to be planning a trip back to the Bay Area to maybe see him play, maybe see Oregon play Cal. Still kind of trying to figure out those details here in the next week or so. But should be some fun football to watch. Absolutely. Let me get to some of these questions, and then I will sign off for today. Let's see. Christopher says, Max, is he going to be a 4-star down the road, or is this kid a stud 3-star? I'm assuming the question is about Lipe Moala, Oregon's latest commit. It's kind of interesting. He's actually not even rated on 247, but obviously his offers would reflect otherwise. Lipe Moala has been playing really, really good football this year. The 3 times that I've seen him play, he's played really, really well. Obviously, that game against against Bosco was the toughest challenge, and he wasn't going up against Mateo super often because he plays the interior, whereas Mateo is an edge rusher. But I think he definitely held up against Bosco, as the passing game really wasn't that great for Elijah Brown and the Monarchs in that game. They did a lot of their damage on the ground. Elijah Brown had a touchdown run, and then Jordan Davison had a long touchdown run as well. So I think that we kind of just have to see how the rest of the season plays out to see if Lipe could get a rankings update or a bump in the rankings, that is. But I think maybe if we see some more schools hop in, we could see him get a ratings bump. But I guess for now, I'd say he's a really, really solid 3-star in my eyes, but trying to get better at, evaluating talent and diving into that. Mikey G says, if I'm not mistaken, the last time we had a Texas pipeline was during Chip. I think, probably him, or when during the Cristobal years, there was a pretty good handful of players that were supposed to come to Oregon, at least. Obviously, in that 22 class, things really fell apart. You had Kelvin Banks out of Texas. You had Cameron Williams out of Texas as well. I'm trying to see. I'm just looking at some of the old classes. Sala was from Texas, Navarro College. So there's another Texas guy, but earlier on, at least in the Cristobal tenure, there was a lot of emphasis on Southern California. So how crazy it would have been to live out here covering Oregon recruiting at the start of the Cristobal era in 2019, which I believe is Oregon's best class ever. Let's see here, looking more of these classes. Yeah, I think Chip probably is the last class when they really did have a super, super strong presence in Texas. I'm going to look at this 2021 class for Oregon. Actually, no, 2021. I think 2021 might have been the highest class that they've had. I am totally having a brain fart on that. Not a lot of Texas for Oregon, and they had Stephon Johnson Jr. committed, but obviously things changed when the new coaching staff shakeup happened. I think the last steady commitment pipeline for Oregon and Texas was probably under Chip Kelly. I know that Willie Taggart was recruiting Florida super, super effectively. So that was an interesting one to watch. But great question from Mikey G, my guy. Another question here. This was a comment, I guess. Mikey said, how strange and cool would it be to see Jay start next year? Completely different play style for sure. Jay Butterfield. Yeah, I don't like looking super far ahead, but at the same time, you kind of always do just by default, because that's kind of what recruiting is. You're talking about the future of a team, of a program, of a school. of a roster, and certainly trying to project for those guys. But I want to see Butters play some more this year. I think that there's some games on Oregon's schedule, Cal, Colorado, that they could, Oregon State even, that they could really put away early, I think, and get Jay some snaps. So I think I've been pushing for Jay to get some snaps for a while. And it's no slight to Ty. I want to see what Jay has, and we haven't been able to see him too much. Let's see. See me on the big screen says Oregon is in the driver's seat to write their own ticket to the CFP. Yeah, I think that with USC's loss to Utah, that absolutely helps them. Now you got to get back to the conference championship game. Definitely have some tough matchups on your schedule the rest of the way here. UCLA this week and Utah later in November as well. So those are going to be some really tough games, I think, for Oregon, but they're games that they're definitely capable of winning, I would say, at this point. So I think that they just got to win the games in front of them and, not shoot themselves in the foot. That's probably one of the biggest things. Andrew says, also, I doubt it'll happen, but maybe if USC falls off, Banuelos could decommit. Yeah, he looks really, really solid after talking to him a couple times in this process. He doesn't really strike me as a guy that might decommit, and it might be too early to say that after just one loss for USC. But that was a crazy game, 43-42, probably the best game in the Pac-12 last week, I would wager. All right, let's see here. And Brooks says, you take away Arch's surname, and there's no way he would be ranked higher than Dante Moore. Yeah, Dante Moore, for what it's worth, me and my colleagues over at SIL American, I guess I shouldn't say me and them because I didn't have a say in the rankings necessarily, but SIL American has Dante Moore as the number one recruit in the entire country for 2023. So they're kind of deviating from the norm there just a hair. But I think that'll do it for this one, you guys. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share the show. Share the Ducks Dish podcast. That's the best way you can support me and what I'm doing. And then also consider following me on Twitter at mtorresports, and go ahead and subscribe to ducksdigest.com, and make sure you check out that site as we continue to ramp up our recruiting coverage. But that'll do it for us on this episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. However you're tuned in, have an awesome day, and we will see you in the next episode of the Ducks Dish podcast.